All right. Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Amalia Weber. I'm the program specialist here at Rochester Hills Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening's program, Winter Feeder Birds with Dinosaur Hill. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping details. Firstly, tonight's program will be recorded and available to view about 1 week from tonight on our YouTube page and on the RHPL website shortly after. We ask the audience members please silence or turn off their cell phones before we begin in order to avoid any disturbances during the presentation. Our next program is In Our Own Voice, African American Art, part of the DIA's Behind the Scene presentation series, which will be an in-person event on Tuesday, February 4th at 7 p.m. You can sign up for that at calendar.rhpl.org. Without further ado, please welcome our presenter, Amanda Felk.
So I have to preface it by saying the feeder birds are not generally my favorite animals, but that doesn't mean I don't like them, right? It just means that I like other birds you might have heard me talk about before here that have really big eyes and are out at night. A little bit better, right? So they're not my favorite, but they're still cool, right? All the animals are pretty awesome. All of our nature here in Michigan. All right, so we'll get started just by going over kind of the types of feeders that you might have or you might have seen before. And these different types of feeders, they're really about what the bird eats and how it eats and its place in the ecosystem. So there are platform feeders. These are kind of the flat trays that you might see. These mimic ground feeding birds a lot of times. So any of the birds that you might see finding food on the ground, they'll be happy on a tray as well, as long as it's big enough to support them. Usually you do not find wild turkey on a platform feeder. I won't say never though. Unfortunately, I don't have photographic evidence. It's all up here. I wish I could show you guys this. So there's the platform feeders. Then there's tube feeders, which are basically a tube that has little holes in it. This is more for birds that eat a lot of seeds that they might have found, inside what's left of the flower after the fall comes and it's gone to seed, right? Then we have a thistle sock, which this is mostly just for us to make it easier to clean up after them, right? And so that's another one where it's very small and birds with very small beaks can get the seeds out, and anything with a bigger beak is out of luck. This is a really good one for goldfinches and some other types of finch. And then there's good old suet cakes, which is a winter and migration only food. Usually we don't feed birds in the summertime anyway, because they have plenty of native seeds to eat, hopefully. But the suet feeder it's basically fat, right? So who doesn't love a good chunk of fat? My favorite has chocolate flavoring, but birds will eat just about any kind of suet. It can be plant or animal based. And then our fifth kind of feeder is a shed feeder. These are the ones that look kind of like houses. Again, these are more for the seed eaters, and it's kind of combining a little bit of platform, so maybe seeds that would be found lower to the ground as their natural food source. All right, so in those 5 different feeders, you put some different seeds. So I'll hand these to my lovely assistant, Miss Margaret, and she'll get to start passing out the ones as I say them. So that way I don't have to read and try to talk at the same time. I also can't chew gum and talk at the same time. So our first one that we're going to make some today, I don't have a sample of it yet. You guys have to make that yourself. Is our suet is going to be Miracle Meal, which is a plant-based suet. And then we have sunflower seeds up at the top. So I think we all know what a sunflower plant looks like, right? And they're the seeds in the center of that. So we have kind of the yellowish color there. are sunflower hearts that have already been shelled. This is if you don't want a mess around your bird feeder, right? Maybe you have pets and you don't want them to eat the spent shells. Maybe it's just on the side of your house and you don't want a whole goo when it rains striping your house with sunflower seeds. Then we have the striped sunflower seeds, which are the ones we usually think of when we think about those pretty sunflowers that have the seeds in the center. And then we have the dark ones up here are the black oilers. So black oilers are again going to be ones that have a little bit more of that fat content, which means they're tasty, right? That's what brains all across the animal kingdom say, fat is good. That's how you survive. So we're pretty confident that we can identify sunflower seeds. Some of the other things that we get that are in our seed mixes include milo is usually what they put it as the ingredient on your seed mix, but it's sorghum. So this kind of grain up here that's got this reddish color to it. And that's going to be for some of your, not as many, more of your platform feeders will like the milo, and a few of the tube feeders as well. Then we have safflower seed, which is the pretty orange and yellow flower there. Safflower is a favorite one of cardinals in particular. And we have peanuts as well. I just really like this picture because a lot of times we don't think about how peanuts grow, right? It's mind-blowing. You see the little flower and you wouldn't even recognize it. And then on the far yellow one there is our Niger, which is what it's often called Niger thistle, but it's actually not the thistle that grows up in our yard and we consider a weed, right? So it's called Niger thistle, but it's from a different family than what we usually think of in America as thistle. I don't think it's quite as pokey. I haven't seen the actual plant grow, but it's actually comes from Ireland. And then corn. I know this is a wild one, right? Has anyone ever seen corn before? But a lot of times we don't think about it as being a seed, right? So it's kind of fun to see it, and think about how it impacts the environment, right? So you can get whole corn is mostly going to be a filler that you'll give to in a mix, right? That would be used for things like game birds. A lot of times, either whole or cracked corn would be something that you would give to ducks, right? Not generally someone that I put at my feeder, but and the corn will definitely be a favorite of the turkeys as well, and the squirrels, right? So had a lot of luck at Dinosaur Hill with not having squirrels at the majority of our feeders because we do two things. We feed mostly black oilers, and we give the squirrels their own peanut feeder on the other side. And it's a tricky one where they have to open the lid to get the peanuts out. And then we also have some millet down here in the corner. Now millet is a very nutritious food for our domestic birds. If we have pet birds, you have a canary, they're gonna love millet. Most of the wild birds aren't gonna like that very much. Maybe a few of the game birds like the turkeys and the grouse and stuff like that. And then every once in a while you put some jelly out, right? Toward the end of the winter season when we can start getting animals that are not our winter feeder birds. We might want to put a little bit of jelly out in hopes that we'll see an oriole, because why not? They're pretty cool birds. I know, and I said they weren't even my favorite, right? So our suet feeder friends are going to include basically all of the woodpeckers that make a home here in Michigan. They stay here all winter long. That's why we're making woodpecker feeders today. The particular ones that we see a lot around here are the downy, the hairy, the red-bellied, and the pileated, if we're really lucky. And then the northern flicker, which I just gave a separate line because it's a woodpecker, but it doesn't have woodpecker in the name. Lucky guy. Then we have two different kinds of nuthatches, and they're named by what color their belly is. So there's the red-breasted or the white-breasted nuthatch. The white-breasted is much more common. And then in the tit family, we have the good old chickadee-dee-dee and the tufted titmouse. We'll also find sometimes robins, wrens, or finches might come and eat a little bit of suet once in a while, and also some fuzzy friends, raccoons and squirrels also like the taste of suet and the fat. Right. So the two most difficult woodpeckers to tell apart are the downy and the hairy woodpecker. They look very similar. There's a little bit of difference in size, which is great if you have both of them sitting right next to one another, right? But if I have a downy at my feeder, and that's all I have is one, it's not so easy to tell apart by size, right? Especially, I'm not great with spatial distances, right? My perspective's a little bit off. So I also have a little bit of trouble sometimes remembering which one. I know these two things have these differences, right? I know that this one has a red spot and this one has a pink spot. But then in my head, I can't remember which one is this one. Is this the downy or the hairy? Right? So I finally have it straight in my head, and I want to share a little trick that I have for telling them apart now. So I try to think of the 1980s. Right? Think of the 1980s. And I remember big hair, right? So the one that has the bigger beak is the hairy woodpecker. And his beak is going to be about the same size as the width of his head. And so as long as I can remember the 1980s, I can remember my woodpeckers. At least these two, right? So they do, the bigger one is the hairy woodpecker. He's got the bills about the same length of his head. He's got a little bit more red on the back of his head if he's a male. If it's a female, then they look pretty much identical. They have the white backs, the white outer tail feathers, and there's a few little black spots on the downy, on their tail feathers, on the underside of their tail feathers that you might be able to see once in a while. So really the big takeaway is the big hair, right? Or I guess if you don't want to think of the 1980s, you can think of Texas. Same big hair. Same thing, right? All right. So these are some of the other woodpeckers and the nuthatch friends. So over on the far side there is our pileated woodpecker. That one is the basis for woody woodpecker. So da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. And he is a very large bird. I'm not sure if you can tell just how big he is based on this picture, but they're about yay tall from the top of their head to the bottom of their tail feathers when they're on a branch. And they'll also often be found getting insects off of dead logs that are on the ground. So you can see them if you look low too. And I was very particular in this PowerPoint and made sure that I found suet eaters that were on the suet, so I hope you can appreciate that. This other guy with the red head here, as you can tell, a lot of birds are kind of named for the most visible characteristics. So obviously, the one with the red head is called a red-bellied woodpecker. You might be able to see just a little bit of red on his belly there, but I mean, the name red-headed woodpecker was already taken. So what can you expect? Below him, we have, such a pretty bird. It almost looks like tiger stripes, right? That one is our northern flicker, and they are a woodpecker, despite not having woodpecker in the name. I guess they weren't in the Cool Kids Club. But their most easily identifiable trait to me, even more than their song, is the way that they swoop in flight. So if you've ever seen one flying, I wouldn't be able to describe it in any other way but there's just like this pattern to their flight that just catches my eye. That's how I can tell them apart. Margaret, do you have any other easier ways to tell a flicker? So if you see their backside, like you don't see here in the picture, but they've got the white on it. Yeah. All right. So up here we have our white-breasted nuthatch. If you come to Dinosaur Hill and you watch our bird feeder, you'll see about 20 of these come back to the feeder over and over all day long. And then the little guy underneath is the red-breasted nuthatch, and you'll probably not see him at Dinosaur Hill ever. Have you ever seen one? Yes. I haven't. You're a lucky ducky. All right. So some other birds that I said you might also find are, does anyone know the little guy with the black cap on him? This one's not a trick question. The black cap chickadee. And then underneath him is his little friend. I did find one of a tufted titmouse on the suet. Unfortunately, it's kind of a derpy shot, so I did show you an actual tufted titmouse right next to that. And then we have a little wren up at the top. Ooh. And again, our little robin. So the robins are actually, you're saying, Amanda, robins are a sign of springtime. Why are you putting them in a winter bird presentation? A robin's name, its scientific name, is Turdus migratorius. You would think that they migrate, and some of them do. But we do have populations where they've migrated south from Canada, and we are south, right? And we have populations that spend their whole time here. So robins are our state bird. I have to put that in because I just did some programs for our birthday. Michigan turned 188 years old on Sunday. Did you know that? Yeah, awesome. All right. So it is our state bird, and it's here all year. Some of them are, right? Just like other Michiganders, they decide some of them are going to be snowbirds, some are going to stick with the snow. And so our robins, they'll come to feeders every once in a while, especially for suet, but primarily they are ground feeders, and primarily insects are their favorite foods. So they might be around, but maybe they just want to hang out with the other birds. I don't know. Then we have some of our other feeders and our other birds that we can find there. And so on the red one there, on the red feeder, can you tell what that is? It is a cardinal. Yeah, I didn't trick you, right, by not putting the red one in. This one is a female cardinal. And so that one is a cardinal. Again, they like the safflower seeds. They'll come to the shed style or sometimes the tube style feeders. And particularly the black oilers and the safflower seeds are some of their favorites. They'll also eat some of the peanuts and maybe some of the corn as well. Underneath them is my personal favorite of the non-raptor birds. It's the blue jay. And they're another one that's going to be eating some of the bigger things. They'll particularly care for peanuts. They'll eat the corn. Sometimes they'll eat anything they can really get to if the holes in the feeder are large enough for them. Then up here, we've got a pair of our dark-eyed juncos, and they're a fun little bird that I really only see in the wintertime. I haven't seen them hang out too much when the feeder's just up during the summertime. And I think we all know this guy here is the American crow. I haven't been lucky enough, but they are a platform feeder. I haven't been lucky enough to catch any at our feeders, although most people would say that's not very lucky. But crows are such intelligent birds, and they're very easy to train. So, and you know, you've all heard the stories of having them come to your feeder and feeding the crows, and then they start bringing you trinkets back, right, to trade with. So that's what I'm hoping for someday. Just got to find that crow first, right? And then we also have another platform feeder here in the middle is the mourning doves. So mourning doves are a ground feeder. They will eat the corn. They'll eat the sunflower seeds, of course, as well. And they usually, if you have one, you have 5, right? Between 5 and 7 is usually the number that I see at a time. And they make that pretty cooing sound. So some of the concerns when we are feeding wild birds in particular are currently our avian influenza, which you may have heard about when there's no eggs in the store, and chronic wasting disease in deer, because not just the birds eat from our bird feeders sometimes. So most songbirds are not actually physically harmed by avian flu. The concern is that if they're catching avian flu, they can then pass it on to domestic livestock like chickens, turkeys, and geese and ducks, waterfowl, and unfortunately, the raptors are more susceptible to avian flu than the songbirds are. And so in order to combat that, the DNR has asked that we do not feed during the spring, summer, and fall when the birds don't really need it. The early spring is usually a good time to add a little supplemental feeding, and that we wash our bird feeders with a solution of 10% bleach, so 9 parts water to 1 part bleach. And any of our bird baths, because water is also a very important thing that animals need in the wintertime, is fresh water, and especially birds. And so, so we also scrub those with a solution of 9 parts water to 1 part vinegar in order to clean those in a scrub brush, about once a week or so, or more often if it gets dirtier. So the chronic wasting disease in deer is spread when they're at a feeding situation and there's multiple deer around a spot. And since they will eat from bird feeders, some of the ways that we can help with that is by keeping our feeders either in a fenced area with a fairly tall fence, or somewhere where they're up against walls where the deer won't like to go, bringing our feeders in at nighttime, or just like making sure that they're empty at night. That'll also keep other animals that might be attracted to your bird feeder, namely raccoons. I've experienced it multiple times at nature centers that I've worked at in the past, where we would forget to bring the suet feeder in at night. And the next morning, there was not a suet cage there. And there was a suet cage down on the boardwalk in the middle of the wetland. Right? So raccoons, presumably, or maybe even a deer, was able to detach the suet feeder from the shepherd's hook that we had it attached to, and they took their meal to go. And then we had to put on the waiters to go get it and refill, right? So they'll definitely, opossums too, will go up onto a bird feeder and eat some suet. So we want to make sure that all of those animals that have hands, they're very dexterous, and they will take that free snack. So it's a good idea to put your feeders in at night, or at least make sure they're empty, but even then, if there's some food left, some of these raccoons and things just go crazy for the suet. Or again, to help with the deer, we can also hang our feeders up so that they're 6 feet off the ground, which is really handy if you have a telescopic pole. Just put it up there. So also coming up in February, there's a citizen science event that I would be remiss not to mention, but the backyard bird count. Has anyone ever heard of that? Right, anyone ever take part in it? Awesome. Wow. Let's try to get those numbers up now, right? You've got plenty of time. I've given you 2 days notice, right? So, so the backyard bird count, it goes across the nation, and people just count the birds in their backyard. If you're a beginner birder, if you're not very, into birds, you can always find someone else. There's always someone who wants to look at birds. There's a lot of different birder groups, and they're always have different like beginner birder kind of classes, if you will, at different nature centers, not just Dinosaur Hill. And so you could go to their website, birdcount.org, and they tell you different ways to participate there in order to count the birds. You can use apps on your phone, like the Merlin Bird ID app. Has anyone ever downloaded Merlin? Yeah, so sometimes you might end up getting a false positive on Merlin every once in a while if you have a bird that mimics other birds, but I found it to be pretty accurate. How about you? Yeah, all right. So the most memorable one that was a little off that I heard of was that they were in Michigan, and Merlin ID'd a red-shouldered hawk, which is possible, but it ended up being a mockingbird. Right. All right. And you can also always look at eBird, either the app or the website, and they'll have a lot of sightings of different birds. So I know these are pretty basic birds for your winter feeder. I don't think my goldfinch slide made it on here. It was a last-minute ad. Yeah, so you can also find goldfinches at your feeder in the winter time. But let's see if I can find it real quick. Whoosh. Okay, so we'll go back up to. So I did have the goldfinch up on this slide here on our tube feeder, and usually in the breeding plumage, they're that bright yellow color, and they're really easy to spot. But when it is wintertime, they are not. They're not yellow at all. They're very kind of drab, grayish brown bird. Let me fast forward again. Right. All right, so now I just wanted to go a little bit over the miracle meal recipe. So in the back of our room here, the side of the room, we have some plastic bags, Ziploc bags. This is going to be the least messy way to mix your miracle meal. All right, so we have a plastic bag, and then we have cornmeal. And there's a little cup inside the cornmeal, and we're going to put 4 of those little cups. It doesn't matter what size that cup is, because all you're doing is a ratio. You want 4 cups of cornmeal, and then you need vegetable shortening. And there'll be 2 cups. Did I remember that right? Yes. Vegetable shortening. And then last but not least, 1 cup of flour. And that all goes into your bag. And then you're going to zip up your bag, and then you're going to smush it all around. This is the sensory exploration part of the day. Right? And then you can take a log that has holes in it. Please take a log that has holes in it. Some of the logs may not have holes on them. Yes, 1 per family. If you would rather not take a log, you can take pine cones. And so then you're going to take that home, when you're outside, and you can snip off the end of your Miracle Meal bag, and you're going to act just like it's frosting and squirt it into your holes or into your pine cone. And if you have some nuts or things, I don't bring them because of allergies and all that. I just would prefer not to kill my audiences. It's bad business, right? But if you have nuts or dried fruit at home that, it's getting a little old, and you're like, oh, those raisins have been in the cupboard for 6 months and I haven't eaten them yet, then you can just put a few of those in there too. And some of the birdies will love it. Awesome. All right. Yeah, and there's outside your home. Yes, beautiful. The Miracle Meal is a semi-perishable suet food, right? So we do suggest that you leave it in your refrigerator, but it can be good for up to a month after it's mixed in the refrigerator. And so you can refill your feeders as often as you would like with that until you're all gone. And then guess what? All of these things are at the grocery store. You can get them all at Aldi. Oh, I should have got them all at Aldi. All right. So then, if we have any extra questions, I'll be happy to answer your questions. If you want to start mixing, that's right. Sure.
Okay, audience participation.
Oh.
Want me to move over here? We've got handheld stuff that you can use. Yeah. And then you can take it, each audience member at their hand. Okay, is it on? Can you hear me? Yay. Like a second. Hello. Yeah. Okay. To help us identify some of these birds, we have simple sayings, like everyone knows what the chickadee says. So I need everybody to tell me what the chickadee says. Chickadee-dee-dee-dee. So let's hear the kids say that really loud. Oh, loud. You can do it, right?
Chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee.
Very good. So we all know the chickadee by its sound. Okay. I need some help. Everybody, repeat after me. Caw, caw, caw. What did we just identify? A crow. Very good. So you might hear him up around your feeder. Now this one I'm not so sure about. It sounds a little bit like this to me. Potato chip and dip. Potato chip and dip. Anybody have an idea of what they think that might be saying? A little faster. They think that's an American goldfinch. I'm not so sure. So next time you're out there, see if it sounds like that. Let's see. Now, at nighttime, you might hear this one. And he might be waiting for your birds in the morning at the bird feeder. So Miss Amanda's going to give us...
Sorry, I only speak barred owl. Gave it away.
Try it again, and we're going to have everybody participate with the barred owl.
Who wants fondue? Who wants fondue now? That's the way I hear it. I'm sorry.
Say it one more time.
Who wants fondue? Who wants fondue now?
Go.
Who wants fondue? Who wants fondue?
Very good. You hear that up in the trees, you're going to know that's a barred owl. And he's probably waiting outside around your feeder because he's hungry too and he's got to eat. How about honk, 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 honk? What might be walking around on the ground near the pond? Maybe you have a feeder nearby. What do we think that is, kids? A goose. Very good. All right. But now I need to hear everybody honk. Now you know we have a Canada goose around here. Let's see what else we have.
That's the one the barred owl responds to.
Who does the barred owl respond to?
Down at the bottom, the last one.
Oh, go ahead.
Gobble, 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 gobble.
Turkey. Let's hear everybody gobble.
Gobble, gobble, gobble.
Very good. We got turkey. Over at Dinosaur Hill, we have had some turkeys recently, and I've lived off the preserve for about 30 years, and this is the first year we've actually had turkey in the winter. So if you come on over and walk, they've been hanging up really quite high in the trees. So we might see them down eating on the ground, but all the neighbors are seeing them up in the morning in the trees.
Not what you would think of as migrate. Like they go to different areas, basically.
Okay. This bird, we think he kind of says ank, 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 ank. Anybody have an idea what that might be? Yay! Okay, everybody, let's do a nuthatch. Ank, 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 ank. Kind of nasally. I work with Amanda and teach a lot of the little kids the sounds. By having the kids practice them out in the field, all of a sudden the kids are identifying all the birds. That's why we're doing it tonight, because even though you came without kids, some of you might have some hanging around. Who says, Peter, 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 Peter? Titmouse. Let's everybody hear it. Peter, 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 Peter. Titmouse. Very good. So we hear a lot of these birds in the winter. You're going to hear more in the spring. But for the feeder birds, that chickadee, you often hear them before you see them, and the same with the nuthatches. So anyway, if anybody wants a little sheet here, we have one. I've got it on the side. On the back is also a Michigan bird list with all the common birds you might see during the entire year. And we're pretty proud. At Dinosaur Hill last year, we saw 65 different species of birds, which we think is pretty good for our 16 little acres. So if we're getting them over there, even around the property, around the library here, we've gotten quite a few birds as well. You're not going to get them all in the winter, but now's a good time to start while you're doing your feeder birds, and then come on and hit the trails during the year and get your 65 on the list.
Miss Margaret.
Yes.
What about the one that said that the barred owl was going to hang out for your feeder to try to get a snacky owl, a snacky bird? But what about the other guy on there?
Which one? There's a lot more.
I don't know how to. Do you not know that one?
I don't know. You try it.
It looks like keek 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 keek. Dot dot dot.
Large bird. He's probably eating all your feeder birds.
Yeah, this is the hawk that if you see it, it does dine mostly on songbirds. So they do tend to hang out by bird feeders. It's a known thing. It's the Cooper's hawk.
The Cooper's hawk. You'll get lots of them around. There's a lot of Cooper's hawks around. So anyway, it's always fun to make bird sounds. It helps you remember them. So had to throw that in there.
Thank you.
How do we want to